And we're back here on the Big Technology Podcast from Davos with Gavin Wood, the co-founder of Ethereum, creator of Polkadot. So we've spoken a lot in the first half about the theory of Web3, of blockchains, and Bitcoin. Let's go to something more practical. So I was asking, where is the cream filling in the first half? But there's an interesting headline in Protocol this week. It says, Ethereum's co-founder thinks the blockchain can fix social media. And not only is it a thought, it seems like there is something that's in action right now. So I'd love to hear you expand upon that.
Yeah, I mean, I think social media suffers from many of the same problems that we've already been discussing. Namely, opaque, largely unaccountable, very centralized entities that are in charge of the control services that a lot of the world rely upon, and that have demonstrated themselves as being either incapable or asleep at the wheel or worse in their duty. And while I think that I think people should really be the ones to be responsible over their own choices. Authority and responsibility start at home. Nonetheless, I think that we need better frameworks and tools, technologically speaking, to allow people to make the right choice and make a choice where they don't have to trust these centralized entities to provide them with the services that they rely upon.
And so, tell me a little bit more about this protocol that you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, this is a collaboration, and I'm happy to sort of announce that Polkadot is the sort of underlying technical framework that this will be implemented upon.
What is this?
It's a combination of technologies. It's a stack of technologies, as all good technologies should be, right? So you can choose where on the stack you want to come in and build. But essentially, it's a very general social networking protocol. Sort of conceptually a social graph protocol. So basically, a means of managing the connections between individuals, humans on the planet, and also managing the information that individuals have associated with them, and that potentially can be associated between the connections of individuals. So it's a very, very kind of abstract platform on which the sorts of applications that can be built are those which we sort of today think of as the big social networking things. But the hope is that it will also, as a platform, facilitate many more kinds of applications, and they won't have to build up a social graph from zero. They'll be able to users will be able to very easily sort of not migrate, but sort of share or copy or utilize these additional products and services without having to sort of do all of this horrible signing up, bringing your friends over, and all the rest of it.
So the idea is essentially I would go in, build my social network on this protocol, and then be able to export it to different applications. Essentially, yes. And likewise, you'll be able to go in, build your application on this platform, right,
and users will be able to sort of come across en masse relatively easily. But it would be their choice, right? You would still have to kind of pitch the application to them. But in principle, it would be an awful lot easier to break these incredible moats and barriers that the social networking giants put up around their social graph.
I like this idea in theory. However, I think about it in practicality, and I have some questions. So the idea of, build your social graph on the blockchain and then maintain control of it and give it to certain applications as you see fit makes sense. But then I think about the nature of the different types of applications or the different types of graphs that I have on each application. So for instance, Facebook is my social graph, LinkedIn my professional graph. Twitter is a asymmetric follow model where I and it's an interest graph, really. And then something like TikTok, my graph doesn't actually matter because the application is looking only at my behavior with the follow as a somewhat of an interesting signal and saying this is what I should show you. So how does the fact that every application has its own unique graph then sync with the idea of making a graph portable, because it seems like it would only be useful in some cases and not others?
Well, the graph is, if we think about it at a conceptual model, it's still just nodes and connections, right? Individuals are the nodes, and there are connections between them, whether it's following, liking, being friends. And this is really this is why I say it's very abstract. It's a model that can be used by all of these applications. But you're right, each application will use this model, this underlying data, differently. Now you say that, LinkedIn is professional, whereas Facebook is social. I mean, there's so much overlap there, at least for me. Like, my work life and my private life are, fairly heavily overlapping, and there are many people that would exist on both of them. And it doesn't really make sense for me to have to add them on one and add them on the other. Similarly with Twitter, like I think like everyone on LinkedIn and everyone on Facebook are Twitter followers as well. So why would I want to replicate these connections so many different times? Same with Instagram. Instagram, it's like basically the same as Twitter. Not all of them will use the underlying data in the same way. As you say, TikTok may take it as only a very sort of, in terms of the services it provides, may only take a relatively glancing look at the actual social graph and use alternative means of deciding what content it will show you and when. But in principle, there are an awful lot of applications out there that are using the same basic data, but that data has to be entered to every platform. And that data is under the control, and who knows what they're doing with it. If you want to read their terms and services, they're usually pretty opaque, and most people don't. Who knows what they're doing with it? And so now, instead of having, you have control of your data, you can sort of decide this. This application can use it for this means, this purpose. And that application can use it for that means and that purpose. You now have 10 applications plus, maybe, I don't know, depending if you're a big social networking user, maybe it's like 20, 30, 40, 50 applications, all working on kind of more or less the same data, all using it the way that they want, which means you've got a multiplication of the amount of trust that you're needing to give for your personal data. And I think, and this came up in an earlier conversation, I think this turns a lot of people off. Like, a lot of people are not super keen on, I know I'm not, on sharing, all of the information with all of the providers. And as such, it limits what kind of products and services can be provided. Like, if there's not that much information being given by the user to the application, then the application can do accordingly relatively little. If we get to a model where individuals are sort of happy to, in some sense, input their information, their data, into the services because they know they're not handing it over to a third party, but rather to an algorithm that's been audited by many different entities, at least one of which they actually believe, that is processed in a means that doesn't allow for an arbitrary, some third party to actually inspect it all and do whatever they want to, advertise various stuff to them that they don't want advertised to them, or conclude certain socio-political things that they don't want concluded about them, then we're in a much better situation. Like, it's much more likely that that person's going to sort of give up more information. I know I would. So I think as long as we rely on centralized service providers that have absolute control and visibility into the information, people are not going to give up as much information as they would otherwise.
So in the protocol article I referenced, there's a line in there. I think the belief is that data disrupts the model. You change the way that these companies hold and process data, you end up in a better society. So I want to hear your critique of what's wrong with the social networks today, and how changing their relationship with data, changing our relationship to our own data might fix it.
I think what's wrong with them is pretty much what's wrong with all of this sort of centralized information communication architecture. It allows we as decision-making, independent, sovereign decision-making entities to be manipulated. And if you can manipulate people en masse, then the world doesn't turn into such a great place. I think the democratic is often used as a means of trying to say we as sovereign decision-making entities should be empowered through the ability to inform ourselves about the world and through the ability to sort of make decisions based upon that information. And I think that is, with the services that are being provided to us at the moment through the big social media companies, that's not working so well. I think we are losing the ability to inform ourselves well, and we are increasingly being manipulated.
And so is your idea that if we have transparent algorithms out there that maybe we can choose, then we'll be in a better position?
Yeah, that's right. No, that's quite.
Why does it have to be Web3 versus allow the Web2 companies to implement that?
I mean, the issue is that we can't trust that they have actually implemented that. Like, we can't trust that they're running these algorithms on their servers and providing us with the results in an unfiltered format. We don't know what data they're running. We can't see that. So, the data needs to be. We need a trust-free way of doing this. It's not enough to say, I trust Mark Zuckerberg. He wouldn't do anything bad to me.
I don't think you'll hear many people saying that. So.
Right. And so we need, Web3 is really just, a proposition of a technology stack that can do exactly this, that allows us to have the data, to know that maybe no individual person can see the data because we have all of this great technology that allows us to consolidate the data without an individual person having the power to actually look at it. But we can run algorithms on it if we all agree on it. If we all agree that, yeah, this is an algorithm that we want to run on our collective data and we want to see the results, great. Then if we don't want to run that algorithm collectively, then we don't run it. It doesn't get run. And it's not that Mark Zuckerberg can come along and say, well, actually, I'd quite like to know the results of that. I shall run it anyway.
So your idea is that people would collectively decide which algorithm they would want to be run on the whole platform versus pick individually.
And maybe there's like a rage quit option where if you really don't want the algorithm to be run on a consolidated consolidated data that would include your data, then you can rage quit and remove your data from it before the algorithm gets run, right? So yeah, anything that allows a collector's information to be processed, that there must be a collective decision-making effort to ensure that it's not being done without the permission of those individuals. And if their permission is, look, give me $50 and have at it, fine. But at least there's transparency.
We had Nick Clegg in this space here yesterday. He's the the president of global affairs for Facebook, and I tried to explain to him, like, listen, people rate the amount of enjoyment they get out of social media, and in recent studies, it's been the last out of every leisure activities in terms of its ability to generate happiness. And what he responded was, we have 3.5 billion people that use our products every month. Clearly, they're not that upset. So I want to ask you about the willingness of people to actually jump onto, something like you're proposing and leave Facebook. I mean, it seems like, I'm curious. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I want to hear you respond to what Clegg said and
how many smokers are there in the world these days?
Okay.
3.5 billion as well? I'm not sure. And they're obviously quite happy with the product from Marlboro and all of the rest of them. Look, I mean, people are hooked, right? And they're hooked because of the network effects. It's super. There's huge amounts of inertia. It's not that the product is necessarily like so amazing that the individuals are using it purely based on that. It's that there is a service being provided that the individual has decided that they now cannot do without. Classic addictive product, right? Classic, very similar to I would say, like the nicotine industry. And I think if this can be like, I don't know, some means of allowing people to get the same like social fix, but without the bad, I would say like potentially democracy destroying elements of it, then great. This is a good thing.
Do you think people will collectively vote to have an algorithm that shows them more boring stuff but less rage-filled things?
I don't think it's. I mean, I wouldn't say that like everybody would need to do this. I look upon it as like lots of different groups of people, some of which overlap, and these different groups. It's like I'm in a group. I'm in this set, a social set, and I care about this particular algorithm. I care about like, hey, what's the average? Give me the average political considerations that this group has concluded. Give me the extremes. I want to know the extremes, right? I don't know. There's all sorts of like potential algorithms and products out there. But the point is that as long as we have only 3 or 4 places in the Western world at least where this discourse is happening, and therefore 3 or 4 centralized organizations that get to dictate the rules of the discourse and the forum, the mechanics of the forum under which it happens, then that's really not a great way of allowing technology to continue innovating and continuing to facilitate healthy discourse.
If we build social networks on the blockchain, does that mean the posts that people put there are immutable and permanent even if they want to delete them?
This is, so at least with Project Liberty, the blockchain isn't going to be used as like a means of, like a data depository. It's really more as like a permissioning infrastructure. And then all of the data stuff comes on top of that. Like all of the data stuff happens largely off-chain, and this is how you like have the ability to keep things relatively private, like solid expectations that privacy will be respected, without having to put it all in the hands of like a single trusted entity that will manage all the permissioning for you. In principle, the technology is then able to handle, manage the encryption on your side so that the people or the groups that you want to see certain elements of your data are able to see it, whilst still having reasonable expectation that the data won't be passed to a broader set of individuals.
Yeah, and I teased it in the first half. I was going to ask you what happens in a situation where you're using the blockchain and a lot of that stuff is public, but and so how does that deal with privacy if you're using a social network built on the blockchain? But I think you just answered the question. That stuff will be stored outside, and the blockchain will do some of the other stuff.
Yeah. So the idea is of the blockchain that primarily it's about permissioning. So it's about managing what the arcs in the social graph are, what these connections are, and what privileges those connections have. And these privileges, the set of privileges, and the structure and sort of language used to describe these privileges might be different for different applications. That's the whole point of that is that it's meant to be sort of able to be extensible. And the underlying technology, ideally, that uses some of the more advanced levels of cryptography so that we can store the social graph and store the information, the sort of metadata of this social graph, in such a way that it retains still a substantial degree of privacy. Now, ultimately, it may not be as simple as I share this information with this group of people, and there is no way that information can ever get outside of this group of people. I mean, for a start, you can always get your camera out, take a shot of the screen of the display, and it's like, yeah, okay, some photo can then be shared. Like making it be completely end-to-end, absolutely 100% private is not really the goal. The goal is to give people credible expectations that their privacy will be respected. And I think we're 80+% of the way there from the Facebook model by using this technology.
I have to go back one more time to the will of the people question. I mean, it does seem like all the well-meaning folks on social media would want to use your solution, and all the angry people who are getting clout from being angry would want to stay. So maybe, I'm curious if you see that as an adoption barrier. Maybe enough of the folks that the trolls want to troll will move over, that they'll end up having a shell of a platform. I mean, what's going to happen there?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, but I mean, I would hope it's not a singular platform. I mean, the whole point of this is that it's extensible and that many different applications can be developed on top of it. And I would expect that people will follow where the discourse is, is most enlightened, is most enlightening.
Yeah.
And over time, if the trolls are the ones that tend to stay on the legacy platforms, then
Sweet, leave them there.
yeah.
So I also want to talk to you about transaction fees, because the big barrier for building something like a social network on maybe a blockchain like Ethereum has been that the gas fees would be out of control. To make any transactions, you'd have to pay thousands of dollars. So understand this is going to be built on Polkadot, which is the second blockchain you've created. Is it going to have the same issues in terms of transaction fees and gas fees that the others have?
No, from the ground up, it's been built to have scalable, decentralized security, and that was from the 2016 paper on Polkadot that I put out. That's really what the premise of this is, and it achieves this through essentially division of labor. Pretty obvious stuff, really, but the engineering behind ensuring that the labor is divided, but we retain the security of that a decentralized system provides. That's the hard bit. That engineering is non-trivial, and it's sometimes mentioned, but I think it does deserve a special point. I built the original version of Ethereum. C++ Ethereum back in early 2014. I don't know. I got something working after a month or two, right? And that was pretty much just me. And it's taken me and a whole load of really great engineers, 4+ years, to build Polkadot. And it's not that we had, I don't know, some sort of terrible car accident at the beginning and we were just debilitated or something. No, the engineering effort required for this, plus we have a research team working behind us, making sure that what we're doing is sensible, what we're doing is actually secure. It takes a long time, and it's I would sort of extend the same point to the Ethereum 2 folks. Building it right, getting it right takes time, and if you see people touting that, hey, we've got a solution already, it only took us 6 months. That's very unlikely to be the breakthrough that they're suggesting it is. But yeah, and there's a lot more to come as well. We opened the sort of labs division at Parity at the beginning of this year. Parity primary company building Polkadot at the moment, and this is looking into superscaling ways for superscaling methods for Polkadot. So we're really looking to push beyond this even thousands of transactions per second. That's a bit of a sort of a goal right now, and looking in the next 3 or 4 years to be orders of magnitude greater.
It was interesting to hear you a couple of minutes ago talk about how the blockchain would be the guts of these potential social networks, but they would still build a lot of stuff off of the blockchain, just as you would with a normal company. Is that really is that kind of the where the best case scenario is for Web3, right? An internet built on top of the blockchain, is that the blockchain serves as some of the guts, but we still use regular programmed programs as the things that mediate most of our experience. There was this great post from Moxie at Signal that talked about how, I'm sure you've read it, how no one wants to set up their own server,
Yep.
in that we basically just want platforms to do the work for us. So is the future that you envision a future where platforms will still do most of the work for us, but they'll just have a slightly better architecture inside that can assure us that there'll be a better experience, or that they'll take care of our data in a way that the others wouldn't? Or is it something bigger? Am I missing something?
The programs that are programmed will still be
Programs.
They'll still be programs, right? No one's. I'm not suggesting that it's going to be a case of like, hey, speak into the microphone. You know, make me a new currency. Make me a new taxi service company. Like, it's not going to be like that. Like, it's or at least maybe it will, but that's not going to be the blockchain element, or the Web3 element. Like, I think it's still going to require normal software developers doing normal software, but the APIs will be different, and the means that you'll think about architecting will be quite different. When I went to university back in the 90s, the way that we architected a system was client server. Like, that's what was taught. There wasn't really, I didn't have a single class on peer-to-peer decentralization. It was not a thing in academia. And funnily enough, when I went back into my old university back in 2014, May 2014, and tried to show them what Ethereum was, they zero interesting questions and almost zero interest. It's just like it didn't like decentralization and you know, a lot of the more novel elements of cryptography, a lot of you know, peer-to-peer and game theoretic stuff. It's just not really a big thing in academia. It's getting there, but it's not really a big thing in established you know, computer science software circles. And I think this is going to change. I think it has to change. People have to be educated better on what it means to build a system that is secure in a peer-to-peer, you know, under peer-to-peer circumstances and trust-free circumstances. You can't just like put the server code down. Now do the client code. The client code just trusts the server code. If the server says that this is that, then it is that, and you don't question it. No. And one of Moxie's points that I thought was very interesting was that, you know, at this point, people are still falling back on that model. People are still falling back on the client-server model, even in Web3. If more than half, 98% of the dApps on Ethereum are not really decentralized. Yeah, a big portion of the logic sits on the Ethereum blockchain. Right, great. But there's still, you still have to go through a centralized service to actually use the thing, right? You still go through Infura, which runs an RPC that's entirely trusted, right? This isn't decentralization. This isn't Web3. It's partly Web3. You know, part of the puzzle is done. And this is one of the things that we're really pushing forward in Polkadot. And the Polkadot ecosystem is, you know, what we call light clients, which is essentially getting the sort of the complete picture, so that you can use a service, and the service is hosted in a decentralized fashion, but also when the user comes to use it, it doesn't go through another just centralized service provider to help you do that. And yeah, I fear that. You know, in the industry at large, it's patchy at best. This you know, this attitude that decentralization is either you know, absolute or it's worthless. But I think maybe things are changing, at least in terms of the political environment that this industry sits.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is the economic environment. And I want to close on this. We're in the middle of a pretty big economic downturn. So I have a couple questions for you about that. First is, a couple days ago, Vitalik tweeted that he's not a billionaire anymore. So are you diversified, or are you in the same boat?
For that, I'd have to ask my family office manager, and I'm not sure he's at liberty to say anything.
Let's get him on the line. Phone a friend. All right, but the actual stats, so Ethereum is down 44% year to date. Bitcoin is down 35% year to date. We just saw what happened with Terra and Luna. You mentioned that one of the things that the folks, the Bitcoin folks, don't like about Web3 is that there has been a lot of, like, you know, froth around things like NFTs and scammy projects. Do you think that this downturn might actually be a blessing in disguise for the space, where the things that were on shaky foundations, like Terra and Luna fall apart, and the things that have some staying power are what remains, and the industry becomes more credible as a result.
This is a very, very big silver lining to that cloud. Yeah, I think so. I mean, of course, if there's less money floating around, then there are a few doors that get closed. But overall, I found, I've been in one or two bear markets before, and overall, I find that it's in terms of building, in terms of the technology, it's quite a lot. Things make more sense. There's fewer people are hyped up about nonsense. There's a bit less nonsense going around, and there's other silver linings. Like it's easy to pick up, let's say, more talented individuals. They're not being stolen away with big dollar signs in their eyes. Things get more real, and that is a good thing for those who are building real things.
Mm-hmm. Well, Gavin, I've had a lot of conversations about Web3, and it's nice to have a conversation with someone who's a proponent and who will sit and talk about some of the criticisms and help flesh out where the opportunity and weaknesses are without becoming defensive or dogmatic. And I really do appreciate the conversation. Thank you, Gavin.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody. Thanks, everyone, for listening. This has been an episode of the Big Technology Podcast. If this is your first time listening, I invite you to subscribe in your podcast app of choice. We always love a rating. We will be back with multiple episodes here from Davos over the next coming weeks, so we hope you tune in. And until next time, take care.
Cheers, Alex.
Thank you.